Okay, I guess we'll get started. Elaine, how does this sound? Are we good on the volume? Did it not go on? Okay. There we go. Thank you. Okay, perfect. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. This is going to be a really interesting topic tonight, and this will be kind of historic in the sense that this is the first time that this information and the photographs that you're going to see have ever been compiled and presented all at the same time publicly. So you're going to see things today that photos and images that likely nobody alive today has actually seen. They've been buried. And again, as I point out often, local historians today have the luxury of the internet and research and emails, like being able to exchange emails with people that can share digital images, unlike our parents' generation that had to go in person to visit a historical society or a library or the county clerk's office. Today, much of this research can be done online, and so it enables somebody like myself to compile an enormous amount of information relatively efficiently and then share it with you guys. Okay, so today we're going to talk about carriage makers in Jordan, and a lot of people are familiar with the wheelbarrow industry in Jordan, which was a big part of Jordan's history. People are less familiar with the carriage making industry, but it was in many ways as significant, if not more significant, than the wheelbarrow manufacturing that took place here. And there were very large number of people who were involved in the carriage making, who lived in the village, the owners of the businesses and their employees. They were able to provide employment for many people. And interestingly, as you're going to hear in a few minutes, many of the carriage makers were actually also involved in the wheelbarrow making businesses here in Jordan. So when we think of carriage, what do we think of? Let's try this again. My clicker's not working. Thank you. It's like I say, we enjoy the luxury of modern technologies, and I confess I still live in the 1800s, and sometimes I forget these things. Now it's not coming out. I'm sure it's there. Thank you. Yeah, close to us, closest to us. Thank you. We're going to do the intros. Okay, so I'll introduce you in a minute. Okay. So before we begin, I'm going to I'll make an announcement, and then Elaine's going to make an announcement about some of her upcoming events. Elaine Peters, the Jordan Village Municipal Historian, and myself will be co-presenting a guided walking tour of the Maple Grove Cemetery on the Saturday before Halloween, and that begins at 1 p.m. It's going to be just for an hour, and we're going to talk about some of the people who are buried there, who were that have interesting stories. We'll have photographs of some of the people or drawings, and each of the people that we'll be speaking about played a role in Jordan history. And this is our second annual guided walking tour. Last year we did the Old Village Cemetery on Quinn Street together. And so if you can come out for that, please do. And now I'd like to introduce Elaine, who will be sharing some of her upcoming events.
So, probably the most interested people here in the room, I'm going to be giving a talk on October 15th. It's a Wednesday at 7 o'clock, and it's called Sacred Spaces in Stained Glass. It's about all the stained glass in the different churches here in the village of Jordan, from the Baptist Church, the Episcopal Church, and the Catholic Church here in town, as well as the Methodist Church up the hill. So we're talking about different makers of glass. We have some amazing treasures that as a community need to be preserved and appreciated, because we have a couple churches that have literally a fortune in stained glass, and they're a gorgeous piece of our community. So I invite you to come out for that talk. Again, it's October 15th at 7 p.m. and we're going to go do Sacred Spaces in Stained Glass. We also have coming up on November 1st, our next of our archaeology metal detecting digs coming up. If anybody has a metal detector and wants to give a try on that way. Don't divulge where that's going to be yet, because we don't want somebody eating their cornflakes one morning finding a detectorist out in their yard like, why are they there? So we don't tell that where it's going to be up until it gets closer to that. But yeah, so I hope to see you on October 15th. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. Okay, so when we say the word carriage, what do we think of? And for myself, grew up reading and seeing fairy tales. Carriages have they evoke kind of a sense of magic and fairy tales. There we go, Cinderella and her horse-drawn carriage and the fairy godmother. This is from the Disney classic film, the 1950 film, and I couldn't help but notice this fountain here looks kind of similar to another fountain that we are familiar with. Did Walt Disney animators model their Cinderella fountain after our fountain here in Jordan, or her twin in Halifax, Nova Scotia? Just a funny coincidence I couldn't help but notice. However, back to reality. Although this photo does have kind of a magical fairy tale quality to it, with this young girl and her white horse, and this photo was actually taken right here in Jordan. Is anybody able to notice anything in the photo that would give you a clue as to where this might have been taken?
Is that a towpath?
It's not. It's actually a street.
Is that the
What's that big tower up there in the left, way up in the corner?
Yeah, chimney shows up.
Malthouse.
Is it the Warner's, the Malthouse?
Yeah.
That's correct, guys.
Huh?
You figured it out. That's the Warner Malthouse on the canal over by the corner with Hamilton Street. And this is actually Clinton Street looking east.
It is, it's
I think I'm sorry. Something fell.
She said there was a milk.
Thank you. So the Warner Malthouse, I gave a talk about that a couple of months ago. So many of you were here for that, and that was Charles Warner's barley malting business, and that's where the Jordan Firehouse is today. That's standing on the same spot. So this would be an example of a typical horse-drawn carriage that may have been made in Jordan. Now you're going to see lots of photos of carriages tonight, and the photos were taken in the village of Jordan or near here. I can't say for sure that any of these carriages were made here in Jordan, but many of the ones that we see will most likely there'll be some in that group that would have been made here in Jordan. So this is representative of that style. It's actually more of a buggy, you could say. And this photograph is courtesy of the Onondaga Historical Association, and I thank them for allowing me to use the photo in this presentation. Okay, so we already talked about, there's the Warner Malthouse. This is the photograph that I used for the flyer for today's event. And this is a photo taken somewhere near Jordan. We don't know the exact location or who the two women are in the photo, but again, it is a very nice example of a carriage, the type of carriages that were made here in Jordan. And you can see, we also had harness makers who lived in the village, and they made this fancy, it's a little difficult to see, but there's a net and fringe as decorative, I assume they're decorative parts of this horse's harness. And then we'll talk a little bit in the next photo about the parts of the carriage, but you see the wheels would have been made out of wood, and the body primarily out of wood. And then this top part that folds up and folds down would have been made out of some type of leather. And then you can see underneath the body, the undercarriage, which has a lot of metal. And some of these buggies were referred to as spring buggies. And that's the whole idea here, is to make the carriage comfortable for the passengers through the use of different mechanisms that provide a spring action. So you can kind of see it here. There's a curved, I believe that's a piece of metal that's curved here, and then above it is another piece of metal. So the two pieces together would form kind of a shape like that, and then when it acts like a shock absorber when the carriage is moving. And then there would also be cushions in the seat, and let's get a closer look. There we go. So again, this is very typical of the kind of buggies that were made in Jordan. Not the only kind they made here, but it's an example. And again, you can see this curved rod here that's part of the spring mechanism, and then there would be a matching pair of iron rods on the opposite side. Does anybody here, I know some people are probably going to know the answer to this question because we have carriage owners here and horse owners here today, but does anybody know what this part of the carriage is called or referred to?
Dashboard.
Thank you, Ron. Yep, you're exactly right. And
For once.
the function that it served was to protect these elegant ladies' dresses from any mud or stones that might be kicked up by the horse's hoofs. And so that's the origin of the modern word that we are all familiar with, a dashboard in a car. Speaking of cars, do you know where the word car came from?
Carriage.
Yep, it's a shortened version of carriage or chariot.
Who got that?
We have the answer to that. Okay, so this is a little chart that I put together because when you think about it, back in the mid-1800s, Jordan was kind of a self-contained, self-sufficient little community. And we had all these different industries and manufacturers and skilled people who could provide what the community needed using the raw materials that were available. And so in this case, the raw materials we had in the mid-1800s, there were still a lot of trees that were still, the land was still being cleared for agriculture. Then, I don't know where the iron came from, but they had access to iron.
Sterling.
Okay, there you go, the iron mine in Sterling. Probably some of it did come from there, thank you, Bill. And domestic animals, such as cows or pigs. The trees would be transported to the sawmill, and there was a sawmill behind what is today Bennett Bolt Works. And so a lot of the initial buildings in the village and carriages were manufactured from lumber that came through that sawmill. It wasn't the only sawmill in the village, but it was one of them. Okay, and so the sawmill would produce lumber, but it would also produce bark. And there were two brothers, the Botsford brothers, who had a bark and a tannin factory. They also made shoes. And as some of you know, the tannin that was extracted from the bark would be used to tan the leather and the skins that came from Crowfoot's slaughterhouse, which was located on what is today Valley Drive. Hiram Crowfoot. He would slaughter the domestic animals. Some of his output or product would be meat, but he also produced a source of leather that could then be used by the carriage makers along with the lumber, and the blacksmith would create the iron for the metal parts of the carriage. And then the Botsfords also had a shoe factory. So you see how everything all ties together. It was very innovative, and they were able to meet a lot of their needs with just what was available at hand here in the village. They didn't have to go to Walmart or big box store. Okay, so there were at least 5 different carriage shops in the village of Jordan in the 1800s, and we're going to look at an early map. This is a wall map. Now, there's at least 3 or maybe 4 known examples of this wall map still in existence. It was produced in 1856 by J.H. French, and it shows the village of Jordan, including the shops and houses with names to go with each person. One of the original versions of this map is hanging on the wall in the Jordan Historical Society Museum next door. There's also one, I believe, in the town. There may be one in the Elbridge Archives. And I know of one in the private, that was privately owned. Also, since we're talking about this French 1856 wall map, I want to mention the person who created the map did illustrations of many of the homes and buildings that were in Jordan in 1856 that border around the map. Some of you have seen this map, and so those are very useful illustrations for us because this is pretty much before cameras came into common usage. Okay, so this is a close-up from the map, and on here I've shown in yellow highlight where the primary carriage manufacturing was taking place in the village, and then you can see each of these buildings are numbered, and there's a key on the map, so these are extracted from the key. So just to let you know, so the Newell brothers, that would be Joseph and his younger brother Asa Newell, were the dominant carriage makers for many years, and that's where much of my talk tonight is going to focus on. And they had a carriage factory right on North Main Street. This was their factory, and they had a sawmill back here that was powered by a race off of the Skaneateles outlet. There is still a large depression in the ground. Back here, this is kind of behind, this is where the St. Patrick's Church is today. So it's kind of in the back, in the woods, this big hole. That's where actually I ice skated as a young girl because it would collect water, and it was a wonderful place to ice skate. So Joseph Newell, this is where the carriage factory was, here on the east side of North Main Street, and this is Joseph Newell's house across the street, and his brother Asa Newell lived here. This house today is owned by Pat McPeak. Some of you know her, and I don't know the family who live here today, but when I was growing up in Jordan, this was the Taylor's home, and you'll see some photos of it in a moment. So that's the first carriage making location. Then there was also a carriage shop, a couple of them, right here on the towpath, and this is this building right here is the funeral home today. And there were actually two carriage making shops, one on the towpath and then another one right here. Of course, neither of those buildings are standing today, nor is this building.
Quick side note, we did find some pieces of metal in our dig in April from the Carriage factory.
Yep, that's where Elaine did her dig with the children earlier this year. Then, that should say 3. Henry Cornell had a carriage shop on Clinton Street, right here. And just, again, for reference, this warehouse or storehouse on the canal is today the home of Karen Simcoe, a village trustee who's with us tonight. Thank you for coming, Karen. And this building is no longer standing, but there was a carriage manufacturing there. And then over on Mechanic Street, there were a couple carriage manufacturing locations on either side of the creek. And on this 1856 map, the location is labeled A.L. Freeman Carriage Shop. Same thing up here, the Newell's Carriage Shop. And then later there was a carriage shop on the east side of the creek. And later that same location had a blacksmith shop owned by Charlie Diltz that some of you may remember from the blacksmith talk that I did back in February, I believe. Okay, and then the last place that we know of where there was a carriage shop was right on this corner of Elbridge Street and South Main Street. And today none of these buildings are standing, but there's the park dedicated to Ken Bush Sr. And at one time, some of you may remember, there were 2 side-by-side twin buildings here. We remember them as Christopher Jenner's blacksmith shop, but before that, they were at least one of the buildings. The north one was a carriage shop in 1856. It was owned by somebody named B.O. Ball, and later it was owned by Lewis Parker. And I also highlighted the wheelbarrow factory down here on Elbridge Street. At this time in 1856, this was actually a wooden building, not the brick building that's there today, but they were already making wheelbarrows in Jordan in 1856 in this wooden building that was powered. You can see the shaft here where they got their water power from the Skaneateles outlet. And this wheelbarrow factory is part of our story today. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're going to start by talking about the Newell brothers. And their carriage shop on North Main Street was later owned by a company, a different company, different owners, called the Jordan Carriage Company. So the Newell brothers came to Jordan in the mid-1830s from Vermont. And they built the carriage shop, which was a 3-story brick building there on North Main Street with the sawmill in the back. And then they manufactured carriages in that building roughly between the mid-1830s and the mid-1850s. And I do want to read this. This is very interesting. This is from a newspaper historical article by E.E. Mann, and he was writing in the early 1900s about Jordan history. And he tells us that at the height of their business, the Newells employed 50 men. Asa Newell was the salesman, and he would tie 4 to 6 carriages together, drawn by a team of horses, and deliver them to eastern and western cities, and then at other times send them to Oswego and ship them by sailboats to states west as far as Wisconsin. Later on, as the western states became settled, the carriage business drifted to Ohio, Indiana, and other states where was found hickory and other lumber suitable for carriages and wagons. So that gives you a sense of how long the carriage making industry thrived in our area. Not forever, but for a number of years, about 20 years. Now, in around 1855, the Newell brothers became two of the first wheelbarrow manufacturers in Jordan. And I want to mention here that most people in this room have heard of Sperry and Rockwell, the wheelbarrow manufacturers and business that owned the brick building over here on Albert Street that's Bennett Bolt Works today. And the reason why that company or business name is familiar to many of us is, well, one, it's on the historic marker next to the building, and also because that was one of the more recent partnerships that manufactured wheelbarrows in that brick building. But there were many other wheelbarrow manufacturing partnerships in Jordan before that, and including the Newell brothers. And the Newell brothers were making wheelbarrows on North Main Street at their Carriage factory, and then later they also started, they owned and started manufacturing wheelbarrows in the Albert Street factory. So originally, the Albert Street wheelbarrow factory was owned by this guy, Artemus Freeman, and he built the original wheelbarrow factory on Albert Street. We saw it on the 1856 map, and that was made out of wood. And then he sold out to the Newell brothers, so they made wheelbarrows in the wooden building. And here's some statistics. They were doing an enormous number of wheelbarrows, 40,000 to 45,000 a year, which means 150 to 200 barrels a day. Like, let those numbers sink in.
Wonder how much they were getting a piece for a wheelbarrow then.
Yeah, I'd be interested to find out.
I think that might be coming up in one of the future slides. And at one time, Jordan really was considered the wheelbarrow capital of the world. And they were used, of course, as we know, on the Erie Canal. And the thing that was what made Jordan wheelbarrows special is instead of having perpendicular sides and bottom, the bowl of the wheelbarrow, if you will, was curved. And that meant that when you tried to dump stuff or tip stuff out of it, it would slide out easily and not get caught in the corners. The Newell brothers also made hand sleighs out of some of the leftover lumber, and they were making, again, an enormous number, 25,000 a year of the sleighs. Later, another partnership, Graves and Sperry, began manufacturing ice skates in the North Main Street brick wheelbarrow and carriage factory. And that is why today, even though that building's no longer there on North Main Street, it's often still referred to as the old skate factory. And then in 1871, the wooden wheelbarrow factory on Albert Street was destroyed by fire. And so Joseph Newell, who was still involved at that time on Albert Street, enlisted a Syracuse architect by the name of James Coburn, who built and designed the brick building that's there today. Such a beautiful building. It's one of our favorite landmarks here in the village. It's very well preserved, stood up over the years. And so they had a partnership, Newell and Coburn. Other wheelbarrow manufacturers were Sperry and Coburn, Sperry and Rockwell. That's one most of us are familiar with. But that's Roger Starr Sperry and Stephen L. Rockwell. And Roger had other relatives who lived in Jordan who came here. I believe they came from Connecticut, and they were coopers. So they came here with their skills and knowledge of how to work with wood to build barrels, and they had cooper manufacturing, big cooper manufacturing over on Clinton Street, near where the photo of the young girl in the horse carriage that we saw earlier. The father of Roger, that would be Earl Sperry, lived in the house that's still there today, an old white farmhouse on the south side of Clinton Street, just as you're leaving the village. And I'll tell you one thing, wheelbarrows and carriages were big business in Jordan, but cooper barrel making was, I think, bigger, and there was an enormous number of people who earned their livelihoods here in Jordan making barrels. We don't hear about that as much, but it was a big part of our history. The census records are full of people whose occupation is listed as cooper, and it was a very profitable business. And again, we had the raw material available, which was the lumber, and they made use of it. And many of these barrels would have been used for liquids such as whiskey, and again, with the Erie Canal, the barrels were very convenient for transporting things on the canal boats. So then, in the mid-1880s, the brick carriage factory on North Main Street was now under new ownership, and that would be Stephen Rockwell and his partner Zebulon Morgan, and they had a business called the Jordan Carriage Company. We're going to hear more about that in a couple minutes. And then, when did the brick building on North Main Street go away? Well, I don't know the exact date, but it would have been sometime around 1922 when a man by the name of Fred Smith built a house on the lot where the skate factory used to stand. So this is just one example of a census record. This is from the year 1850, and it shows Joseph Newell. He's 38 years old, and his occupation is listed as carriage maker. He owns $5,000 in real estate. He was born in Vermont, and this is his father, William Newell, 64 years old. And Joseph's parents, William and his wife, are buried at the Old Village Cemetery in Jordan. Okay, so this is the 1860 Suites Atlas map, and again, this is North Main Street, Delhi Street, and here you see J. Newell's carriage shop and the sawmill in back, powered by a mill race from the Skinny Atlas outlet, and Joseph Newell's house across the street. And this says BS, I believe that's blacksmith, but Asa Newell did live up here where Pat McPeak lives today. This is the 1874 Suites Atlas, 14 years later, and here's Asa Newell's house. And now Joseph Newell's house has been sold to S. Wood. Now, for those of you who were at the talk I gave a couple months ago on the history of the Jordan fountain, you may remember that we talked about how that fountain was dedicated in memory of a local farmer, Smith Wood, by his son, Samuel Newell Wood. And so this Joseph Newell sold his house and his land over here on the corner of Hamilton and Delhi to Smith Wood, the guy that the fountain was dedicated to. And that was around 1872. And then the carriage factory is this thing here labeled paint shop. And now this business is owned by Roger Starr Sperry from Sperry and Rockwell fame. And then you see the sawmill back here on the mill race. Okay, so these are just going to show, again, the same building on North Main Street over a period of several years on the Sanborn maps, which were the maps that were created by the Sanborn Fire Insurance Company, and they kept track of things that could relate to a fire insurance claim, such as where boilers were, chimneys, and the composition of the building. So the code for the Sanborn maps is that pink means brick. So this is the front of the carriage factory / skate factory on North Main Street. And then yellow is wood frame. So they had another back part of the building that was made out of wood, and you see some things here written: blacksmith, the trimming room, we're going to talk about carriage trimming in a little bit, painting, warehouse and office, storage, and woodwork. So this was all when the carriage factory was owned by Stephen Rockwell and Zebulon Morgan in 1885, and the company was named the Jordan Carriage Company. And then again, this is the house across the street that used to be Joseph Newell's house. Okay, now there were Sanborn fire insurance maps made over 5 different years, not successive years. They would skip a few years in between, but every few years they would do another map. So this gives us a lot of detailed information about the history of our community from things that we would not otherwise have any way of knowing. So in 1890, Stephen Rockwell owned the building. It doesn't look like they're doing any carriage manufacturing anymore in 1890. It just says painting and storage. Same thing, 1898, 8 years later, still Rockwell owns it, painting and storage. And then now in 1904, it just says Jordan Manufacturing Company Machine Shop, but it doesn't really say exactly what they're manufacturing, and I don't think it was carriages. But they were using this building as a skate factory between the Newell brothers and Rockwell and Morgan, who resumed making carriages in the building. In between, they used it as the skate factory, and we'll be talking about that in a bit. Okay, and then now the last of the Sanborn maps in the series, it's 1912, and a guy by the name of Shaw has a foundry in this building. So I don't know if this would look familiar because it doesn't really look like this today, but this is Joseph Newell's house that was across the street from the carriage factory. And this is one of the illustrations. We're going to look at several tonight that are taken from the border of the 1856 wall map. So this house today is known as 33 North Main Street. Oops. Does that look more familiar to people? Do you recognize this one? Yep. So this is a photo taken in 1980, and coincidentally, Debbie Taylor, the youngest of the 4 daughters in the Taylor family who lived in this house in the 1980s, was my best friend growing up, and so I spent a lot of time in this house, and it's a lovely home. Beautiful early home. And a view from the side. And another more recent photo from 2012. And for those of you who are familiar with the house, it is under renovation today. Oh, and this is a hitching post. There's another one off to the right. And a carriage block here for boarding your carriage. And the families who've owned the property over the years have kept these historic landmarks. As children, we would sit on the hitching post to watch the Memorial Day Parade. Okay, so Joseph Newell lived to be 92 years old. This is newspaper clipping from 1904 when he celebrated his 92nd birthday, and by then he had actually moved into Syracuse and left Jordan, and he had made a fortune, literally, in Jordan, making carriages, wheelbarrows. He was a real entrepreneur. And there's a picture of Joseph Newell taken from his obituary later that same year, after his 92nd birthday party. He died in December of 1904. I do not have a picture of his brother Asa, and I only recently acquired this picture of Joseph, which was thrilling to finally find a picture of him, because these 2 guys have been on my radar for many years. Now, I did mention that he moved into Syracuse in 1871, 72, after he sold his house in Jordan, And it says here that he was well known as a horseman, and until enfeebled by age, he kept a fine stable. And it mentions here his involvement in the carriage making and sleigh and wheelbarrow making businesses back in Jordan. This is just another photo of him and another obituary from a different newspaper. Okay, so what did the carriage factory on North Main Street look like? That's been the big mystery for so many years, and we've only had a few photos that we could refer to, but this is one of them, and some of you may be able to pick it out. So this is one of the slides from the Warner Malthouse talk, and the Warner Malthouse is this enormous conglomeration of buildings here where the firehouse sits today. You see the Erie Canal. This is looking north toward Cross Lake. This is Hamilton Street. This is Clinton Street. And up here is North Main Street. And off here to the right is the front of the 3-story cube-shaped brick skate factory. The Cooper business that I mentioned earlier took place in here, between the canal and Clinton Street, and there were these Cooper manufacturing barns. Later became a slaughterhouse owned by the Crowfoot family. This is a close-up from the previous photo, and it gives us a sense of what the front of the building looked like, but it's frustrating because it doesn't give us much of a sense of what it looked like.
Darn.
It's kind of blurry, but there it is. Here's one of the other existing photographs that we've had of the skate factory. This photo was taken in 1907, and the most recognizable landmark in this photo is the St. Patrick's Rectory, which is this home right here. That looks pretty much the same today. Where St. Patrick's Roman Catholic Church is today used to be the Graves Mansion, which is this beautiful home right here. Some of you came to my Warner Malthouse talk, and Charles Warner lived in this house next to the rectory that used to have a nice little cupola on the top. That's no longer there, but the house is still there. And behind these 5 girls in the background, you can see the side of the brick carriage factory. We do know the names of the girls, or at least 4 of them. So Elizabeth Agnew, Anna McPeak, Genevieve Bond. This woman's name is unknown, and then Elizabeth McNally. And again, you can see in the background here the carriage factory. And the St. Patrick's Rectory, that should look familiar. Okay, this is one of the only other known photographs of the skate factory, former skate factory. It's very unsatisfying, of course, because it's so blurry. You can just barely make it out here in the background. You can see it was pretty close to the street. But there it is. However, recently I was with Elaine. We were together at the Onondaga Historical Association, and we discovered that there is a picture that I hand it to Elaine, and I say, I'm just looking at a random folder of photographs, and I said, Elaine, why am I not recognizing this photo? Well, the reason...
And I told her why.
The reason is we've never seen it before. It was... I forgot, there's one more in between. Okay, this is not the photo. This is one that was shared with me by Stephen Scanlon, who grew up across the street, in the house across this, in the brick house across the street from the former carriage factory. And so that would be the house just north of Joseph Newell's house. I'm sure many of you here remember the Scanlon family. Jim Scanlon was co-founder of the Jordan Historical Society, and he was also the French and Spanish teacher at the high school, and the family went to St. Patrick's Church. But before they owned this brick home, it was owned by Charles Strickland and his wife Louise. This is Louise here with her cat Tim, and some of her relatives, including this woman here, Helen Pearson. Her maiden name was Newell. She was Asa Newell's daughter. And then Aunt Kate Baker, as she was known, and somebody named Mrs. Brown. I don't know her first name. So this photo was taken because Aunt Kate passed away in April 1924. We know this photo was taken sometime before then. And you can see here in the background the skate factory. And so I was very excited when Stephen shared this photo with me 2 or 3 years ago, because it's the first time that I was seeing the front of the skate factory up close. Still not exactly satisfying. And also I want to acknowledge Bill Hecht, who's videotaping our event tonight. This photo, when it first came to me, was ripped and it had a hole in it, and he made all that go away. So we see this nice retouched version, which is crystal clear, sort of. Ah, look at this. This is the one from the Onondaga Historical Association. And this is the whole reason I'm doing this talk tonight, is to share this extraordinary photo with you. This is the building that I didn't recognize because we've never seen it before, but thanks to Elaine, she figured it out. It's the Carriage factory, or the skate factory.
What happened to it?
Ah, good question. We don't know exactly how or why it was taken down, but as I mentioned earlier, it came down sometime around 1922. And the next obvious question is, what's there today? So this is, oh, by the way, again, I want to acknowledge this photo was shared courtesy of the Onondaga Historical Association. Okay, so this little red rectangle here shows approximately where the Carriage factory stood at one time. And it's basically the driveway between these two newer bungalows that are there today that were built on that lot after the Carriage factory was, shall we assume, demolished. The sawmill would have been back here in the woods, and then this would have been Joseph Newell's house here. You'll recognize the St. Patrick's Rectory here, Mrs. Bramley's house. So here's another view looking at it from the street, and you might have asked yourself or wondered, why are these two houses newer than the other houses on that side of North Main Street? And that's the reason why. So again, the Carriage factory would have stood right in here, approximately where the driveway is. So this is an advertisement for the skate manufacturing business. And again, there were different owners, and it's sometimes complicated to sort out who owned what when and what they were making in the same building, but these were made right here in Jordan, and thanks to Bill Hecht, I have a couple of examples that you can come and look at later. A pair of ice skates made right here in Jordan at the skate factory. And these were patented by Hiram Clark, the design. They're wood with metal, and think about it, they made tens of thousands of these. There was a big demand for ice skates. While we're on the subject of artifacts, another artifact that you're welcome to come look at after the talk is something that was shared with us by Stephen Napoli. And this is...
Horse weight.
I can't even lift it. It's so heavy. Oh my goodness. This is called a horse weight or a horse anchor. So if you drive your carriage into the village and you want to go inside a shop to buy something and you don't have a hitching post or any place to tie the horse, you clip this to the harness and you throw this anchor on the ground and your horse is not going to go anywhere until you come back.
Really better. They could have filled it, but they wouldn't.
So this advertisement is from the 1864 New York State Business Directory. So not only are they advertising Graves and Sperry skates, but they're also advertising Newell and Sperry wheelbarrows.
So, Lynn, those skates on the table would have had leather?
Yes,
Yes.
to fasten the shoe. Yeah.
Yeah, so there was a spike that your heel, to help the heel of the shoe in place. So that's what the spike is for. You just had your whatever boots that would hold on there, and then the leather straps would go over that and hold it onto your foot, like a, use your regular boots.
It's funny when I think about it that the place I used to ice skate as a young girl in the former sawmill area was right as a result of a skate factory that once stood a few yards away, and I never knew that at the time. I was mystified. Why is there a big hole in the ground here? We never figured it out. So here's one example of a newspaper announcement in 1866 saying the skate factory in Jordan manufactured 45,000 pairs of skates during the past season. And again, the skates were patented by Hiram Clark, and that's what's stamped on the sole of the wooden skate you'll see here when you come up. Okay, it's hard for me to see this clock. How are we doing? 8 o'clock, okay, thanks. So this is just a couple of photographs of these two skates and the imprint on the sole of the skate saying Henry Clark and a patent in Jordan, New York. Okay, so this is the only illustration that we have. We don't have a photo of the original wheelbarrow factory on Elbridge Street, owned by A.L. Freeman and later by the Newell brothers. And this building did burn down in 1862, I believe it was, and now the brick building that's there today, Bennett Bolt Works, was built to replace it, and then they continued manufacturing wheelbarrows in the brick building. Okay, here it is. 1871 is when they had the fire that destroyed the building. And this is just a nice photo of the next building, the brick building, and you can see down here there's an enormous number of wheelbarrows stacked up ready to be sold. This building was built in 1872 by Joseph Newell, who contracted with a Syracuse architect by the name of James Coburn. We mentioned that earlier. They went into partnership together afterwards as wheelbarrow manufacturers. This is a nice photo of the back of the wheelbarrow factory, showing the brick one, the new one, showing the sawmill and a bunch of logs piled up in a close-up. So again, this was very important part of the process, was taking the raw materials, the natural resources, the lumber, and turning it into wood that could be used to manufacture wheelbarrows, ice skates, barrels, and houses and buildings. And carriages. Thank you. I knew I was forgetting one. Okay, and then here's a nice photo taken by Bill of the carriage or the wheelbarrow factory today. Okay, the next We know less about the carriage manufacturers at these other locations, but we'll briefly talk about them. So the two on the towpath, again in 1856, you see number 35 and 37, A. Period Newell Carriage Shop, and A.P. Newell. And again, this is right next to what is today the Bush Funeral Home. And this shows a picture, and I believe this building here with the little cupola on the top was the carriage shop, and later the blacksmith shop. So again, this is looking east from Hamilton Street. This is the bridge over North Main Street, and the Presbyterian Church steeple over here, and Karen Simcoe's house right in there. Most of these, I think actually all of these buildings along the towpath here are no longer there today. And that's just a nice close-up, and it's this building here that I believe was the carriage shop. And then the one that was also near the towpath that bordered on North Main Street, this is, that's a mistake. This is not from the 1856 wall map, but it is a very, very early photograph. This is North Main Street. This is the Masonic building here, and this is the funeral home building, and I believe this building here would have been the carriage shop. And at this time, what's today the brick funeral parlor, at that time was a marble works. Then this is Ken Bush Jr.'s home right here. That's still standing today, as is the funeral home. Okay, then Henry Cornell, he was another carriage manufacturer, and he had this location on Clinton Street, on the north side of the street, and on this 1874 Suites Atlas, it's labeled W and BS, which stands for Wagon and Blacksmith Shop. Again, this storehouse that's labeled Sperry and Rockwell Storehouse is the Simcoe house today. That building is still there. And then, of course, this building on the corner, the building that's there today is not the same building that would have been there in 1874. That building was destroyed by fire, but it's where Peace Love Coffee is today, the Jordan Hotel here. Okay, and this is also Clinton Street, and it's from the 1885 Sanborn map, and it shows Henry Cornell Carriage Shop. And again, this is the Simcoe house and the Erie Canal here. Henry Cornell had two daughters, and one of them married the son of Franklin Hovey, who was a village harness maker, closely associated with the carriage making business. And Franklin's other child, Catherine Hovey, married Stephen Rockwell. So they kept it all in the family. And Henry Cornell's other daughter, Emma, married Stephen Rockwell's younger brother, Louis. Okay. Oh, and by the way, for those of you who were at the fountain talk, you remember Franklin Hovey was not only the village harness maker, he was also the person who supplied water to the village of Jordan for the fountain from a spring on his property. And that house and property is today the home of Deb and Tim Stapleton, who are here with us tonight. More coincidences. Okay, now we're going over to Mechanic Street, and you'll recall when we looked at the 1856 wall map earlier, there was a carriage shop both on the west and east side of the creek. So in 1856, it was A.L. Freeman who was making carriages in this location. He's the one who also built the original wooden wheelbarrow factory down here on Elbridge Street. Again, on the 1860 Suites Atlas, it's still being used as a carriage shop, same location. Notice down here, Tannery and M. Gould. That's where the tanning business took place that we talked about at the beginning. The leather that was tanned and then made available for use in carriage making. And so Morris Gould had his tannery right here on Albert Street, across from the mill. And that building is still there today. It's under renovation. That's the former Gould's Tannery building. And then later, this is from the 1912 Sanborn map. We have, again, here's Mechanic Street and Skaneateles Creek, and then there was a blacksmith and wagon shop on the east side of the creek. And now the trolley station is in this location, and this later became just a blacksmith shop owned by Charles Diltz. Now this photo is going to be a surprise to many of you who have not seen the earliest photos of Mechanic Street in Jordan, but this is Jordan. I know it doesn't look like, this is downtown Jordan. I know it doesn't look like that today, but this is Mechanic Street looking east, and then this would be South Main Street over here, and this was the Peck and Tyler Engine Works. They made steam-powered
Traction engines.
engines and
They're called traction engines.
traction engines. Thank you, Alan. And so that's
McCormick had one.
right. Yeah. Mr. McCormick would bring it to the Fall Festival every year, and us kids would enjoy seeing the old-fashioned steam-powered vehicle. So that's what Peck and Tyler made. And they had an enormous cluster of buildings at that location where they also made wheelbarrows. And off here to the left is, I believe, a photo of the carriage shop that we just saw on the early maps. Here's another view of Mechanic Street. And again, it probably doesn't look that familiar in many ways, with a couple of exceptions. This is looking east on Mechanic Street. Maybe the person who took this photo was standing on top of the Peacelow Coffee building. You can see the Methodist Church in the background when it had a steeple, which later, this top part of the steeple was later removed. These two buildings here in the foreground are part of the Peck and Tyler business. That's the sign. And then over here is where a carriage shop would have been. That's the same building that I highlighted in the previous photo. This is an earlier version of the Village Hall building in the firehouse that was later replaced with the current building in 1911 or 1910. I always get that one mixed up. Okay, and then this is a blacksmith shop. This photo was taken in 1968. Again, this is looking east on Mechanic Street. The creek is over here. This house is still here today. It's a blue house. And this was Charlie Dilt's abandoned blacksmith shop, which was demolished later in the same year that this photo was taken in 1968. But at one time, there would have been a carriage shop at that same location. Okay, now we mentioned earlier the Christopher Jenner blacksmith shop down on the corner of South Main Street and Albert Street. That was identified also as the carriage making location for two different people, B.O. Ball and Lewis Parker. And that would be right here where the Bush Park is today, across from the mill. And so in 1856, it was the B.O. Ball carriage shop. And in 1860, it doesn't say who's making carriages there. In 1874, it's just labeled as the blacksmith shop. And then in the Sanborn maps, that's when we see Lewis Parker's name come up. So Christopher Jenner had the blacksmith in this building, and then the carriage manufacturing was in this other building just to the north. This would be Cabin Creek Antiques. That building is still standing today. Peg and Mike are with us from the antique shop. They're with us tonight. And we're going to see some photos this is the previous map. North was at the top, but this is sideways, so the north is this direction. And again, the blacksmith shop on the corner and the carriage manufacturing business here. I'm just going to skip through those because they're all the same. And here's what they look like. Again, with the blacksmith shop here, and this building would have been where they made the carriages. And Christopher Jenner did purchase these properties, ultimately both properties from Lewis Parker, the former carriage manufacturing, and he continued just doing blacksmith work in that building. There's another picture of the blacksmith shop. You can see in the background the Bennett Bolt Works building. And then a couple of samples of wagons, or this one omnibus or stagecoach, and a wagon that may have been made in Jordan. Another later photo taken in 1940 after the businesses had gone out of business and been pretty much abandoned later. As some of you remember, this became a car repair business under several different owners, and then eventually it was demolished. Okay, so I found some interesting information in the census records, and I just looked at a few years during the mid-1800s, and so this is just to show how the number of people who list their occupation as carriage maker or wagon maker or carriage trimmer increased as time went on, because the businesses were very profitable for the people who undertook them. So that was 1850. Now you see in 1855 you have a whole bunch of additional people, including the Newell brothers, and there's actually another person named Asa Newell, different person, and Henry Cornell, the one that had the shop on Clinton Street. And another 5 years later, again, a large list of people involved in carriage making, wheelbarrow making, and carriage trimming and wheelwrights. So the wheelwrights made the wheels for the carriages, and then the Wainwrights made the body for the carriages. Do I get that right? I never knew what the word Wainwright meant, but I learned recently that it means they made not the wheels, but the body of the carriage, I think. And then the 1865, now it's starting to drop off a little bit. And this was an interesting thing that was also in the New York State Census records for 1865. And this has to do with a question that was asked earlier about the cost of the ice skates. I don't have a calculator handy, but you could theoretically calculate the answer to that question. This was a recording of data associated with local businesses rather than people. And you see here we have the Newell and Sperry Wheelbarrow Factory and the Graves and Sperry Skate Factory. The annual product for the skates, this is the second line that goes with these two lines up here, 50,000 skates per year. And the value of raw materials perhaps could be used as a part of a calculation to figure out what they may have invested in manufacturing the skates, and then the price could be estimated from that. So this is just a summary of the information that was visible in the previous screen. You see that the wheelbarrow factory employed 30 men, the skate factory employed 15 men, and the monthly wages were $45 to $50. That wouldn't go very far today. And I just want to mention, this was another carriage maker that I have a photograph of. He was listed in the 1850 census. This is Charles Armstrong Rhodes. He's been on my radar for a long time. He built this brick house on Hill Street that is now owned by the Rink family, who has lived there for many years. But originally he was the first person to live in that house. He was an abolitionist, and I am pretty convinced this house was the site on the Underground Railroad. And there were some cisterns in the basement that I'm told are still there today. And it's said, according to legend, that the people who were seeking their freedom were hidden in the cisterns in the basement. But in 1950, Charles Armstrong Rhodes was manufacturing carriages in Jordan. Okay, all right, so this is a few images from the Jordan Carriage Company's catalog. And I just wanted to share some of these with you so you could get a glimpse of what was actually manufactured here in Jordan. And as I said before, it's mostly the buggy type. And okay, here's our friend Stephen Rockwell, who was one of the co-owners of the company at that time. He's also famous as Sperry and Rockwell, wheelbarrow manufacturer. He married Catherine Hovey. That's the daughter of Franklin Hovey we talked about before. And so this is just the cover of the catalog, and I can go through these images quickly. I'll point out, notice the spring mechanism and the undercarriage of each of these images, and then the top that folds up and down, the large wheels. Again, it's all about comfort. That's why you need these
That's
springs.
identical to the photograph you had with the ladies in it.
Yep. And then the dashboard, we now know what that's called. If we didn't already, some of us already knew. Okay, and here's another one. You can see they made them really fancy. That's one of the things I love with these tufted, these would have been, the seats would have had leather, and where they actually put buttons on and sewed it to make the tufts for cushioning. There were springs in the base of the seat, like a box spring type spring. Again, it's all about comfort. You can see the little steps here for entering into the carriage. Spring buggy, another spring buggy, elliptic, side spring buggy, Whitechapel buggy, a two-seater, another two-seater with lanterns on either side. Very nice. Called it, sorry, oh, I have to share a story with you. Okay, so many of you know the McCabe family that live next door to the St. Patrick's Roman Catholic Church on North Main Street today. And when I was a little girl growing up in Jordan, I visited that house often, and also the Carriage house that used to stand in back of their home. That home was owned by my great-great aunt and uncle, Pete and Risa Craner, and I loved exploring inside their carriage house because you'll never believe what was still in their carriage house in the 1960s.
Surrey with a cream jam top.
And carriages, other carriages, and they were fascinating because I had never seen things like this in real life, only in Walt Disney movies and things like that. It was kind of magical, and they did have something like a Surrey with the fringe on top. And they were the Craners, who had lived in that house for many years, were a well-to-do local family, and so they could afford to have nice, fancy carriages that were still there. Another double-seater, and a delivery wagon. And then this is just showing the top that folds up and down and a nice view of the seat. So that's the catalog from the Jordan Carriage Company. And this is a envelope that has a return address pre-printed for the same company. And this, I looked up and learned this address that it's being sent to is the H.A. Brown and Brothers, which is a carriage manufacturing business in Pennsylvania. Okay, so Now that we know a little bit more about carriages and carriage making and the history of carriages and carriage making in Jordan, let's look at a few early photos of Jordan that have carriages, buggies, wagons, and just look at these images with new eyes now that we have a better understanding. So the first few are not actually photos, but they're illustrations from the wall map. I'm going to go through these quickly. I realize we're getting near the end of the talk, but I just want to share a few of these images with you. So in the illustration, they of course include a buggy and a stage of some kind, stagecoach. And this is the Jordan Hotel. It doesn't look like what you're used to seeing today because originally that building was only 2 stories tall, and then later they added the 3rd story. But that's what it used to look like. This was the building that used to stand on the corner where J&T Car Care is today, at this time known as the Graves Block. And again, we see a nice buggy and a wagon over here. This is the Masonic, many of you remember the Masonic Hall. Same location where today's Masonic Hall stands. This building was here into the 1970s when there was a bad fire. Before that, it started out as a hotel, and then later was purchased by the Masons. And again, just some more buggies and carriages. This is the Platten House, Mayor Platten's house, right next to the Masonic Hall on North Main Street. There's a nice little buggy with the top up and the dashboard and a trotting horse. Okay, this is from the Buell collection. This is taken on South Main Street around 1942, and as the carriages were becoming less and less in use. But again, it looks very similar to the illustrations we just saw in the catalog and in the other photos. This is one of the sleighs. This was taken out in front of the White Mill. Ellis Robillard and his son in 1944. And again, as we talked about, sleighs were also made in Jordan because there was a market for them. And you could make them in a similar way that if you had the equipment and know how to make a carriage, you could easily make a sleigh. The Brace Hardware store with a carriage parked out front. This building, of course, is still there today on South Main Street. Another view of South Main Street with some buggies in the background. A close-up, this is the corner of Lawrence and South Main Street. We get a nice view of the back of one of the carriages with the top up. More carriages and the White Mill in the background. Again, here's the fountain. So this is where J&T Car Care is today. A nice little enclosed carriage over here. A couple of delivery wagons in front of the hotel building. There's a close-up of the wagon on the left and a close-up of the wagon on the right. They're apparently delivering milk in the milk cans. And the horses helping themselves to some water in the fountain. There's another nice photo of the horse and the fountain in use.
I think they should have left that fountain there.
Oh,
That's my opinion.
believe me, you weren't here for the fountain talk, but it's on YouTube if you're interested. I can provide people with a link to the YouTube video. But yeah, unfortunately, the base of the fountain was starting to deteriorate, and so it was taken down in 1929. But I agree with you. I wish it could have survived until the present day. It was so beautiful. Now, this building may not look familiar to many of you, but this is the building on the northwest corner of the main intersection in Jordan. That is where Peace Love Coffee Shop is today. I have to give special acknowledgement to Bill Hecht, who retouched this photograph. It's a very early photo, like sometime before 1876 this photo was taken, and that's when this building was destroyed by fire, and the current 2-story brick building was built to replace it. This is an extremely early and rare photo, and the original was a mess. Had black lines all over it, and Bill cleaned up all those black lines. And over here you can see, it's the only photo we have that shows the original 2-story brick hotel before the 3rd story was added, in this nice sign here that says Clinton House. This is the funeral home that's still there today, and the bridge over the canal on North Main Street.
And those, back in that other photo, it looks like the smaller carriage shop, there's 2 other buildings there, and that's a newer building there. Or that was torn down.
That's correct. This gable roof building here would have been, I believe, the carriage shop, as you say, Tim.
And what's that one there?
Because it was between the funeral home, and this is referred to frequently as the Case Block, built by Alonzo Case, and that was the frozen meat locker when I was a little girl in the 60s growing up in Jordan. Of course, this building is no longer there. Later, this gabled building was replaced by a 3-story wood frame building that is in most of the more recent photos. That was called the Rockwell Block. So this is one of the only photos that shows this early gabled building, which is most likely the carriage shop, as you point out.
Oh, okay.
This close-up that shows, again, the funeral home, carriage shop, Case Block, and buggies. That was the point of that. This is a very familiar early photo of the Converse Block, also known as the Hendricks Block, where Peace Love coffee shop is today, and the hair salon, and a nice Jordan buggy, and a carriage shop visible in the background. Another nice photo of the fountain with the automobile that kind of led to the end of the carriage making industry in Jordan. A delivery wagon of some kind, again at the main intersection, and Bill Crowfoot, part of the Crowfoot slaughterhouse family, with a delivery wagon. I don't even want to know what this is, but
That's a sign.
That's a sign, yeah.
I did share this photo with a few friends recently, and I said that the biologists discovered this only known example of the kind, it's maybe extinct now, a unicorn in Jordan. It's no more in here. It's not a legend, they really did exist. Oh, this is a fun photo showing more buggies, fancy buggies owned by wealthy people whose house was referred to as a mansion, the Graves Mansion. This is where St. Patrick's Church is today on North Main Street. You can see they had a beautiful home, some very nice carriages, a top hat, and a nice carriage house in back. Those are some close-ups from the previous photo. So now we kind of recognize what a Jordan carriage looks like. This is a photo taken in front of that same house a little bit later. And this is Lucius Craner and his brother Charles Craner. This is most likely a carriage made in Jordan. It's a wonderful photograph of a likely Jordan carriage. Lucius went on to become mayor of the village for many years. He owned a coal and insurance business, and his younger brother Charles became a dentist. This is a photograph of the, this is Mechanic Street. So this is the blue house that's still there today across from the dollar store. And this is a former blacksmith shop where they also made carriages. Another nice early photo I'm taken on Mechanic Street with a nice buggy and some fancy leather work on the harnesses. This photo is also taken on Mechanic Street.
To keep the hairs out, to keep the flies off the horse.
Yeah.
Ah, so not just decorative?
Yep, that's what it's for.
Oh, that's interesting to learn. And more fringy harnesses here. I think this was taken where the festival grounds is today. and it's like a Surrey with a fringe on top, and a couple of local couples. And this is Quimby's Bridge. You can see a couple of carts or wagons crossing the bridge. Another close-up of Quimby's Bridge with a horse-drawn vehicle crossing the bridge. This is Valley Drive. And we've got lots of photos that show buggies going up and down Valley Drive. That would have been one of the main ways to get to the village of Elbridge. So these are just a few of some of those photos. This is a mail delivery cart on Valley Drive. And a couple more Valley Drive. I'm kind of skipping through these because I want to get to the last section of the talk. This is a delivery wagon, another delivery wagon. Okay, this is what I want to make sure before you guys leave. You see these photos, and I'll go through them quickly. I realize it's we've all been sitting, well, you guys have been sitting in those uncomfortable metal chairs. I don't want to torture you much longer, but I did mention earlier that Joseph Newell, after he left Jordan and had become a multi-millionaire, he moved to Syracuse and he built a beautiful mansion on James Street in 1872. And this is looking southeast, and you see the Erie Canal running through the city of Syracuse, and his James Street mansion is somewhere over here. Here's a close-up. These two towers are part of his mansion. He could stand in the towers and overlook the canal and all the activity downtown. And half of that house is still standing today. It's known as the Joseph Newell House, and it's been beautifully restored. And Elaine and myself and Gail McCabe took a site visit to the house recently and took some photographs, and not these aerial photos, but this is just from the same angle as the previous drawing to show you. This is half of the mansion, and then there's this nice carriage house in back. And today, this building is the residence and the business of a tattoo artist. It's called the James Street Parlor, and he was kind enough to give us a tour of his property, his historic property. There it is. Isn't that beautiful?
But by this time, the observation towers had been removed, just to note.
Correct. And so this photo would have been taken sometime in the 1930s to the 1960s when it was in use as a funeral parlor, the Balwick Funeral Home. And this photograph, again, is courtesy of the Onondaga Historical Association. I just love this photo. It's so beautiful. So again, only half of this is there today. This was basically a duplex. It was a two-family. So everything that you see here is gone today. This was a photo taken in 1984 when the building was purchased and they did a full renovation. And so the next photos are photos taken during our recent site visit. So there's the front of the building today, and the side, this is the west side of the home, the carriage house in the rear. All of it is so well preserved. It's so impressive. They don't make homes like that anymore today. Beautiful detail on the carriage house. This device was on the property when the current property owners bought it. Some kind of bookbinding device with a lever and a wheel. Here's a close-up of the sign on the device. And then the owner, again, he's a tattoo artist. He's very talented. He made this beautiful mural on the east side of the house. And now we're going to go inside. Those, of course, are original doorknobs on the front door. So this is the inside of the house. So much of it has been preserved. It's remarkable. And he's fixed it up really nice for his tattoo business. There's the first of two marble fireplaces.
And they're pure white marble. There's no flaws on this marble. These were Top grade.
Just mind-blowing. The detail and attention that went into building this house initially was extraordinary. This is the second of the 2 fireplaces. Some columns, a sample of original wallpaper, and then the tattoo artist, Paul Rowe, he painted this dragon mural around this room, around the entire room, and you can see all this original wood trim that's all been so
Mahogany.
beautifully restored, and on the ceiling, just incredible. It was such a thrill to go inside and see the property in real life. Okay, so I'm going to end it here. I did have some photos to share with you from this Carriage Trimmer's Manual, like where they cut the pieces of the top from the leather of the animal and things like, just little things like that, how they made the seats, some tools, but you guys got the gist of it. I think we'll end it there, and I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. It was so exciting to be able to present this information to you for the first time. So as a reminder, we do have the Friends of the Jordan Historical Society group. We have our events on the last Tuesday of every month. Next month's talk will be the part 2 of the History of the Jordan Fall Festival. So that will be on October 28th. Thank you. And so you're all invited to come for that. My name again is Lynn Fall. When you entered, you were hopefully given a postcard with our website, the jordanhistorical.org website. There's lots of interesting early photos of Jordan on the website and blog posts, and so we do invite you to visit our website. And I quickly wanted to just briefly acknowledge that, again, at these events, it's a group effort, and I want to thank Bill Hecht for retouching the early photos and just extraordinary. Almost every one of the early black and white photos that you saw here were retouched by Bill. And also want to thank Stephen and Shelley Napoli and Sally Howell for the refreshments and publicity, Mike's setup, help with research often. Thank you to Elaine for her collaboration, and the site visit. That was a really fun. The site visit to the Newell House, that was a lot of fun. And thank you to everyone who continues to support us, and we'll look forward to seeing you hopefully again next month. And there's refreshments in the back, so please help yourself.